Right, so the YouTube should be working. All this technology, eh?
Wow. Magic.
So I get monitor the YouTube. Right, so the YouTube should be working. All this technology.
YouTube's working.
Perfect, thank you. You can chat there. Oh, it's... I'm just wondering why that's streaming me.
Hi, Alan, you okay? It's
Hi,
Shazia.
Shazia. Hi, Shazia.
I'm hiding because I'm in my pajamas, guys. I'm glad everyone else is dressed for the occasion, but I'm too tired.
It's allowed. It's allowed. You've probably got it on speaker view, Matt, if it's showing just you.
See, I shouldn't. I've got you. Oh, I know why. I've got you pinned, but I don't have you spotlighted. Who's tapping away? YouTube is working. Oh, thanks. Oh, hi, Laurie. How you doing? Right, exit full screen. So I've got lots of different chat windows and everything going on at the moment. Right, why can't I have control over that? I'll tell you what, Alan, do you want to start just sharing your screen now, actually?
Oh.
Cool, I think we're all good. I'm just going to check it on. Just waiting for everyone to get in, then we are going to kick off. I say we're going to get going. We're not going to go into a fight.
Never know.
Well, you are from the northeast. Huh?
Oh,
Will there be a replay of it? Yes, there will be a replay. Just letting everybody in. Just letting. We've got a busy one tonight, so we'll get going in literally, well, probably about 10 past. So everyone to get in. In fact, can I do my polls here?
Good to see you, Alan.
Hello. Hi, Lisa.
I give my love to Jackie.
I will. Are you in black and white there? Have you gone back to the 1960s?
I'm still in 1960s. It's the best place, mate.
All right.
So we're just seeing who here is IEMT trained. So the vast majority of people we are. So some people want to be in the future, so we're in the process, and some people just know. Excuse me, I keep yawning. I'm very rude. People keep asking me where I am on Facebook. I'm in Facebook jail. It's ridiculous. I got banned the other day. Somebody very meanly hacked my account and then put up 29 indecent images of children on my account, which is pretty bad, you know. Terrible. So, yeah. Okay, so guys, you're going to be able to chat with me. If you have any questions, please put them to me and I will put them to Alan. At the end as well, that's great. So, lots of... bloody move that. Lots of people who are IMT trained, so the vast majority of the people are over 60%. which is great. And those who aren't, are you looking to actually get trained in IEMT? So those who aren't trained, are you looking to get trained? So yes. Not applicable. Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to start recording as well. Recording in progress. Okay, I do have a training coming up, not this weekend, the weekend after. If you are interested, because I think I'll be able to see who actually says this. If you are interested, I've got, like I say, not this weekend, the weekend after, the 19th and 20th. If you're interested in just learning more about it, just click on yes. And if you want to click on go away, Matt, please feel free to do so. I know a lot of people. Okay, Mario. Oh, Carlos. Cool. Like I say, hopefully I actually get to be able to see who said that. Yes. Yeah, I got in Facebook jail for a week now, which is not good. Okay, people, like I say, all the people who just clicked me there. Also, if you are interested, just drop me a message as well, and we'll just chat about it. See if you want to attend. I've got 2 places left. So cool. Right. Okay, that's great. Let me just close that for now. And that poll sounds a bit drastic. Okay, so hello everyone. I hope we are all fabulous. I've got a really great talk speaker interview, however it's going to be this evening. Please make sure you are turned to mute, and if you could turn your cameras off as well, it just means it's going to be a better recording. It just helps our bandwidth. So please make sure you're on mute, and please make sure that you've turned your cameras off. If you have a question throughout today, please just basically stick it into the chat box and it'll come through to me at the end of the presentation. So the first half an hour or so, whatever it might be, is going to be Alan just talking about his work and giving an actual presentation. And then we're going to have Q&A. You can come on, show your face. Now remember, this is going out, this is being recorded. If you don't want to show your face, then I don't come on the camera. You can just speak as well, but please do raise your hand so I can come to you. Okay, Christine said don't worry about that. Okay, guys, so we're going to be here for an hour-ish. We're going to get all the content done within the hour. Then, you know, if people stay around for Q&A, that'll be cool. I'll stay around here just because I'm lonely. Right, so let's get on to tonight. So I first met Alan when we both trained to be IEMT practitioners. I believe that's when we first met. So that's going back a number of years now. But Alan Johnson is the owner and trainer at Change Working, and he's a therapist and coach at Alan Johnson Change. Alan has spent over 30 years working in the NHS and other public and third sector organisations, specialising in drug and alcohol services. During this career, he was involved with commissioning services in the drug and alcohol in the public health areas. Now a trainer, coach and therapist with his company, Change Working, he's based in North Allerton, which is in North Yorkshire, and where he trains people in NLP, IEMT, OldPain2Go and metaphors of movement, and that's the people throughout the UK. So I'm going to hand over to Alan. Let's get rocking. I'm going to mute myself. Alan, if you have any questions, obviously just put them to me and stuff. If not, it's over to you.
Thanks very much, Matt. Welcome, everybody. Hello, friends, old and new. I do recognise quite a few names and faces. You've probably trained with me or met me in the past. I know you're all on mute and your cameras are hidden, but it would just be useful if you just switch on your sound and say yes to one of 2 questions I'm going to ask. First one is, I've seen Emma there, so we've got at least one other OldPain2Go trainer, but has anybody else trained in OldPain2Go?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Thank you. Quite a few people. And the other one is, does anyone regularly work with trauma as part of their kind of their remit of what they do. They come across it quite frequently and are comfortable with trauma. Is anybody who already works with trauma?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Not so many, but there's quite a few. Great. Thank you. So I'm just going to give you my version of how I combine a couple of approaches. So, and in fact, this is how I do most of my sessions for emotional work, whether it's trauma or whether it's anxiety, fears, phobias, sadness, loss, whatever it might be. It's a similar kind of process. So if you've been to see me on a one-to-one, you'll know this process. If you've heard me talking about it in the past, it's pretty much the same process. But what I want to show you is that IEMT is probably the most powerful thing to work with trauma, but OldPain2Go is also really, really powerful at keeping things changed. So who's this then? Well, there's me. I'm from a little town in in County Durham called Shildon, and that's my dad's car when I was a kid. I'm now in Northallerton, North Yorkshire. I was a bit of a rebellious teen, as you can see. And I used to be a nurse. I started as a general nurse and then ended up as a mental health nurse, worked in prisons, probation, drug service. I had my own quite bad depression in my 20s and went off on a journey of understanding people and how I could change me, because I thought, well, if I don't change what's going on the inside, this is going to be me forever. I'll be vulnerable to this forever. Set me off on a journey of learning all sorts of things. And NLP was the first thing I started training. Since 2005, I've been training NLP, and since then, I've learned IEMT, which is the next thing. Been watching Andy train it for a long time. And Metaphors of Movement, again, I've modelled Andy, and OldPain2Go with the originator of that, which we'll get to, Stephen Blake. I also work with the veterans organisation called Rock to Recovery. And I think we've got a couple of people in the group who are working for Rock to Recovery too. And also, I see clients privately. I'm married to Jackie there, who does exactly what I do, but with teenagers where anxiety and trauma are going through the roof over the last 5 or 10 years. So what plan for tonight are just a quick whistle through these things, really. A bit about OldPain2Go, what it is, if you've not already trained in it. If you have already trained in it, apologies. I'm going to give you some of the basics. A little bit about my version of PTS and some of the problems with, in my opinion, this is all opinion, by the way, with regular post-traumatic stress treatments. The Rock to Recovery approach, which is what I currently use a lot of with the clients I see, and how I structure a session with a client, how IEMT and PTS works for me, and it's not always the linchpin method. In fact, I would say more times I don't use the linchpin method. Success story, and then you can chip in at any time through Matt, and I'll answer questions as we go, or at the end, we can have as many questions as you like until Matt gets bored and switches us off. So what's OldPain2Go, first of all? I know some of you are trained in it. The ones who aren't trained in it, it's a simple talking methodology originated by a guy called Stephen Blake, originally for long-term pain, physical pain conditions. And he worked on it for quite a long time around things like arthritis and back pain and old injuries. But since then, it's expanded quite a lot about what it's useful for. So it's useful initially for any long-term unwanted symptom that no longer serves a purpose. I'll come on to a bit more detail on that in a while. So chronic, enduring, persistent pain is what it's used for by many of our practitioners. It's very, very good for fatigue conditions, fibromyalgia, ME, chronic fatigue, lupus, anything, even multiple sclerosis symptoms, anything where there's a symptom that's unwanted of fatigue or pain. And with the fatigue conditions such as fibromyalgia and ME, it often totally switches the symptoms off in one session, which seems fantastical, especially if you've got a medical mind, but it does work. And I actually use it more for emotional states. So I don't get a lot of clients just coming to me for aches and pains and physical stuff, but a lot of people I see have emotional issues and physical pains and fatigue symptoms. So it's really useful for helping the guy. I saw a guy today through Rock to Recovery, and his emotional stuff was sorted with a process I'm going to show you today, and his knee pain that's been there for 6 months has disappeared in the same session. Provided the client has been medically investigated and the medical profession has basically said, you'll have to live with it. There's nothing we can do. You're going to have to take painkillers. So it's got to be something that's been checked out by the Western world paradigm, which is the medical model. And if they've kind of given up or said, just live with it or take some painkillers or have exercise, then it's safe to get rid of it, because the pain, as you'll see, is a message. But it's also now being used successfully for lots of other things, including allergies. And now there's OldPain2Go, which is a weight loss plan using the similar technology. So the main elements of the overall process of OldPain2Go, we've got to look at intent. We've got to look at what's the unconscious doing this symptom for, and also what's the conscious intent. What do I want? And what's my unconscious doing to give me a pain or an emotional state that's stopping me doing something, or it's making me do something I don't want to do. So it's a bit of a mismatch between me and my unconscious. As Milton Erickson said, your patients are only your patients when they're out of rapport with their own unconscious. And this is a really good example of how it can affect us. We've got to find the story. This is with every client. I'm giving you kind of the overview generically of OldPain2Go, but it does apply to trauma. It does apply to the emotional work. So we've got to find stories. We've got to find the story of how did this symptom begin? What was happening when it began? And also what's making it persist in 2022? So even though this started in 1985, what's making my unconscious keep this symptom all these years later? So it's about negotiating and reaching agreement with the unconscious. So as an OldPain2Go practitioner, you're the mediator between a person and their unconscious. And we actually, well, I see it like I've got two people. It's like a couples therapy. I've got two people with two very different opinions about how to get the same thing effectively, that we need to kind of see each other's point of view and allow the unconscious to stop something that's out of date. So it really fits, I think, with IEMT, because it's a very similar principle. Here's an old memory. I froze, my life stopped, and I can't get past it, and it's just there all the time. And it's a very similar but slightly different approach in lots of ways, and it fits together really, really well. So it's letting go of the old painful programs and also possibly installing any new programs the person needs to go forward with resilience. Now, especially with trauma, if somebody has been frozen for a good number of years, we do need to replace. Our system doesn't like a vacuum. So sometimes it's about then adding in resources, then adding in programs, things that are going to keep the person well going forward. I'm sure I'm teaching me, as my mother used to say, teaching me granny to suck eggs here. But I think it's really important to understand the basis of this. And I also think it's the basis of IEMT, really, that the conscious behavior, the conscious thoughts, the things that I've got aware to me at this moment are actually driven by the elephant, the unconsciousness, everything I've ever experienced. And if I get blips and blinks and trauma and frozen stuff stuck in my system, that will affect how I am right now and what I'm focusing on. And if they haven't seen me demonstrate this or anybody else, to ask a layperson, they would say that the man's in control of the elephant, getting it to do what he wants it to do. But if the elephant found a predator around the corner, the elephant would be off and there's nothing the guy could do. And I see that the same as our conscious-unconscious split. It's about equivalent in size, and what we feed into our conscious affects our unconscious, but our unconscious is always in control. And this is why everything that you're working with your clients using IEMT in stuck states, chronicity patterns, and also with OldPain2Go cannot be resolved by talking about it. How many people talk about it? So, pain is a message. So if we've not looked into pain, pain is not in your leg or your back, it's in your head. And obviously you don't tell clients that because doctors tell them that and they don't like it. But ultimately it's a message from the brain saying, I believe we're in threat here. There's a part of your body isn't working correctly, or you've been hurt or damaged, or there's a disease entering your body, and it will tell us to act, and we have to act. And the different levels of action depend on the level of the perceived threat by the brain. So the perceived threat, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, is a really good metaphor for how it works with trauma. So my brain thinks something that happened 40 years ago is still happening, or I've got to watch out for it happening again every single second of every single day. So it's an old message, no longer useful. Same with physical pain. The example I will give to people when talking about OldPain2Go is that of phantom limb pain. So we're working with a lot of veterans. A lot of veterans know people who've had limbs removed, and people with phantom limb pain still get the pain in a specific toe in a leg that was chopped off 10 years ago. So that, to even the medical mind, will show people how the message cannot be in the part of the body where the pain is, it must be in the brain. And when the brain sends a message and we've acknowledged it, it should turn the message off. And that's emotional or physical pain. They follow the same neural pathways. Physical pain and hurt and emotional pain and hurt follow the same neural pathways. That's why they're often so intrinsically linked. So very briefly, this is the structure of pain. We get a problem, we get an injury, we get some illness, we get an appropriate level message. I have a paper cut, it's painful, but all I need to do is do that and hopefully it'll go away. If I break my arm, it's such a loud message that I probably can't ignore it and I must get medical attention. So it will scream in agony at us to get something to do something with it. So we'll take the appropriate action. And once we've got the pot on our arm, the pain should go away because we've done everything we can do. And then after 6 weeks or 3 months, whatever it might be, then I should have full range without pain. If there is still pain and there's nothing on an X-ray, there's nothing in the examination to say that the pain should be there, it's probably an emotional thing that's being trapped. And this is why OldPain2Go works really well with trauma, because it's actually about emotional pain that's being trapped in physical pain. So when this doesn't happen, what we've got is, now if you don't use this story with your clients already, use it with your clients. So Soichi Yokoi, him anyway, in 1972, was a Japanese soldier that was the last soldier to be found on one of the small Pacific islands near Java. So he'd been placed there during the Second World War by the Japanese army, and they'd forgotten about him. And he didn't know, and he wasn't the only one. There was many of these in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, in the early 70s. They didn't have the computers, they didn't have the technology they've got these days, and there were thousands of islands, and some of these guys got left behind. So 28 years after the war had ended, he was still fighting for Japan. Now, it might have been easy to ridicule him, but actually he was given a medal and a hero's welcome because he had stuck to his orders. And this is what happens, I believe, with our unconscious. It gets given an order and nobody countermands it. And it's the same with IEMT. We've got to be stronger than the symptom and tell the symptom it's out of date. We do not need you to run that program anymore because it's now, it's not then. But we've got to be kind to the unconscious, and we've got to make sure we thank it for what it was doing, even though it was mistaken. The Japanese soldiers, great story. So we've got to take into account, in a physical ailment especially, is there an emotional attachment to the cause? Are they being told to avoid something unconsciously? Is guilt, anger, or shame involved? Well, again, with trauma, that's often something that's there. Does the person understand what the body's trying to tell them? Does it understand the message? Is the message connected to what they've done? Are they in control, and might it happen again? Do they need to change their behavior? Have they taken appropriate action? Did it not heal because they didn't do the right thing? Is it reaction? Is it the actions of somebody else? Do they need some justice? Do they need somebody to pay for what's happened? And has that not happened? So with physical injury, I found when I work with people with physical ailments, often somebody's hurt them and they haven't been able to get their own back, or work has damaged them and they haven't been able to get their compensation, or they just haven't been able to retaliate. And that sometimes means that the pain stays longer, in my experience. Has it had time to heal? Is it getting worse? What expectations do they have? Do they think it should be right after a few days when it needs to be rested, or whatever it might be? Also, and this is so relevant with my experience of trauma as well, what has the doctor told them? Has the doctor told them it's only going to get worse, there's nothing we can do, you're going to live with this the rest of your life, it's going to be debilitating, and eventually it's going to kill you? And professionals meaning to be direct and informational often scare people. And the same with as I'll talk about, the response that people get when saying that they've got a trauma and how it's handled, and the lack of hope that often is given to people. The learned helplessness is ridiculous. Is there any advantage to not getting better? So some people call it secondary gain. I would say that's primary gain. That is stopping me getting hurt usually. So I'll stay unwell and nobody expects anything of me. I'll stay unwell because I'm part of a support group. And if I got better, I wouldn't be able to be part of the support group. I'm staying unwell because I get benefits. I'm staying unwell because everyone does things for me. So again, less relevant with a lot of trauma clients, but definitely with physical, long-term chronic physical conditions. Are they talking about the language? Are they talking about the thing every day? Do they wake up and look for the condition? Do they wake up and go, I feel all right. Oh no, there it is. And they go looking for the problem, whether that's physical or emotional. Are they talking themselves into being unwell? I'm going to have a bad day today. I'm always in pain. I'm always sad. I'm always upset. And, you know, if you've not done neurolinguistics or hypnotherapy, you may not understand the power of some of the words that we say to ourselves and that others say to us. So can we help them linguistically going forward as well? Is there a belief system interfering with it? Do they feel as though, so with trauma, do they feel as though they'd be a little bit disloyal to get rid of the pain because other people suffered worse than they did? That might get in the way of change. Are there any beliefs about how they believe the world could change for them? Or do they have any beliefs that are, I'm not worth it? Well, I don't deserve to be well. It's just how I am. So we might have to explore stuff before we do any change work about basic self-belief and identity stuff. Is there a fear of changing? And often people are frightened of the change. And I always say, a lot of people say they want change, but they don't really want to change. So this is about ownership and making sure the person is actively involved in the process. And it really involves them taking ownership of their stuff and moving forward. I only expect to see a client for one session when it's OldPain2Go, if it's physical pain especially. If it's emotional pain and trauma, it's usually 1 or 2 or 3 sessions for most people. So it is about them taking ownership, getting rid of the old programs that's been stopping them and giving them the empowerment and the resilience to be different going forward. Because the last, as we know from the IEMT training, if you've done it, the last thing they want to be is how they were before the trauma. They don't want to be that person, and they can't be that person. But that person was vulnerable to feeling like this in response to the trauma. They need to be someone standing forward with resilience. So I'll do a couple of these. So when we're talking about physical pain, we're listening out for the message, the story, the metaphor. So if you've done metaphors of movement, it fits really well with this too. If you've done the metaphorical symptom and what it might mean. So very quickly, if I have headaches, who's doing my head in? What am I thinking about? What am I overthinking? If I'm getting facial nerve pain, neuralgia, who's getting on my nerves and who's in my face? Pain in the neck. Yeah, somebody's giving me it in the neck all the time. I can't speak. I've got no voice. I'm shouldering responsibility. I'm carrying a burden, metaphors of movement. I need to give something the elbow. I can't hang on to something, wrists. I need to get something off my chest. I can't stomach it. I feel sick. I'm sick to the stomach. I'm fed up of this. Oh, the best one, bowels. Well, this is shit. I'm full of shit. My life's shit. I can't hold on to shit. I need to hold on to shit. I need to let shit go. Best one ever was someone who didn't give a shit and he was totally constipated. Hips, often about carrying someone, like we carry a toddler. So at work, am I carrying someone? Am I carrying this family? Knees is often about making a stand or standing up for yourself. Feet are about digging in, putting your foot down, taking a step forward, metaphors of movement stuff, really good. So you can hear how our body tells us what the emotional problem is. And we just make the person aware of, this is how it started. You've caused this by, or your unconscious has caused this. When this thing happened, it made a rule about the world and it's sticking to it. The fire alarm analogy for pain would be, if the fire alarm went off where you are right now and the fire service came out and they said, well, there's no fire, but just in case you get a fire, let's leave your fire alarm on all the time. That would both be very annoying, but also pointless and useless. And if I got a new pain, if I got a new symptom, how would I know? So the symptom is like a fire alarm going off all the time. So if there was a real fire, if there was a new emergency, I wouldn't know. When we take painkillers or when we take antidepressants or when we take other medication, we're simply stuffing a pillow over the fire alarm. But our unconscious knows we've done that, so it makes the fire alarm louder. And we stuff more pillows over it, it gets louder and louder and louder. And this is in the physical pain world, why people start on paracetamol and end up on fentanyl or morphine, and the pain doesn't go away. The pain just gets louder because we're trying to muffle the message. Instead of listening to the warning and saying, thanks, unconscious, I know what you've told me to do and I will do it, we'll push on and we'll push on and we'll push on and take medication, and we never listen to the message. So I spend my life telling people to slow down, take care of themselves, put themselves first and boundary themselves. And that's what most people actually need to do. So it relies on an idiomotor movement. Again, if you've done any kind of hypnotherapy, you'll know about idiomotor movement. You might have known about the finger twitch or the swan neck or balloons floating things. This is basically, if you don't know about this stuff, where your body moves you without you asking it to. So I say to clients, when you're dropping off to sleep, does your leg sometimes flinch when you don't ask it to? And they say, yes. And I'll say, well, this is what we're doing for the communication with the unconscious. But in this case, what we use is a full body sway. So we ask the person to stand up and we ask them to just do a gentle sway forward. I'll demonstrate it with you. Now, for this, would you please, you don't have to put your cameras on, but would you please put your sound on? I just want to hear your reaction if you've not done this before. If you've done it before, of course, you don't need to bother doing this because you know it works. But I'm just going to show you. So if you want to do this, please unmute yourself and stand up. And I'm standing sideways on to show you the kind of thing that we're going to do. And I would say to a client, so what we're going to do is we're going to ask your unconscious to give you a signal for yes by gently swinging you forward like this. So I'll show them what I expect of their unconscious. But I do say to them, you must purposely do nothing. You're just purposely going to stand there. Your job is to just stand there and do nothing. And if you're someone with a chatty head, if you talk to yourself and you're very logical, stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth to shut your brain up a little bit while you do this. So I'm just going to ask your unconscious. So unconscious, are you prepared to talk to them? And if you are, please give them a gentle sway forward for a signal for yes now. Okay, I can see the one camera that's on, the person's swaying. The rest of you did it? Did you feel that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, please sit down.
Yes.
So we did, thank you. Please mute yourselves again. So that's the basis of the communication. So instead of having to ask questions, we just ask yes questions, yes, no questions. And we've got a direct communication with the unconscious. And we layer in, obviously we prepare a lot, the preparation before we do that is the most important bit. But that's essentially the movement that we get from people to be able to communicate directly with their unconscious. So it's based on the fact we're born with survival skills and we all have parental type figures, whether we've got parents or other adults, and we learn how to do things. And I am going to rattle through this actually because of time. But before the age of 7, we have imprints. We take the world in without logic because we don't have logic. And before the age of 3, we haven't really got communication. Before the age of 18 months, we're unconscious completely. So a lot of the stuff that gets set down is unconscious. It gets set down very, very young. And we haven't got the logic because of the age it was set down. We can't talk about it logically. This is why a lot of talking therapies don't work for this deep stuff, because it's held at a picture and sound level inside of us. So we've got to change it at an unconscious level. That's why IEMT works so well. It works on changing the internal representations rather than the logic of what I think this means. A really good example of the unconscious being an opportunist is post-viral syndrome. Long COVID is the new one. A lot of people get chronic fatigue conditions after a virus. It's called post-viral syndrome. The person 99 times out of 100 has been a very fast and driven person who puts everyone else first, hasn't slowed down when they've had a headache or a backache or IBS or anything else. Nothing slowed them down. And then they get a virus which puts them in bed and their unconscious goes, I know how to slow them down now. Let's keep these symptoms. And it's simply their unconscious stopping them doing anything because your unconscious doesn't care if you thrive. It's simply there to make sure you don't die. So if you're in a 9 out of 10, horrible, stuck in your bed, feeling aches and pains and absolutely shattered, it's not bothered as long as you're alive. So it will make you do that because it doesn't trust the person to slow down and look after themselves. Very similar with trauma. The person is in a set of symptoms that seem impossible to escape because the unconscious doesn't trust the world around them. So the two stories I've talked about, we've got to bargain with the brain. We've got to let the brain know why, or the unconscious know why it's no longer appropriate, and them consciously if they haven't worked it out. That old behavior of being on high vigilance, of hyper alert, of scare is no longer needed, but they need to understand what the unconscious put it there for. It was a split-second decision that I need to be on high alert. When it's related to pain, we've got to make sure that the fire alarm, that if I'm always in pain, how do I know when I get a new symptom that needs checking out? If I'm always scared and anxious, how do I know when there's a new threat? And it's actually more dangerous to be on alert all the time, rather than being selective to what's happening in the now. And also the quality of life and ability to thrive is affected. A chronicity pattern, by very fact, it's a chronicity pattern, keeps the person stuck where they are. It keeps them in the current comfort zone and it stops them growing and learning and changing. And their quality of life has got to be affected. So we're bargaining with the person and their unconscious. And also that they've got free will. So just because they're getting some scary symptoms doesn't mean they can't do something. Feel the fear and do it anyway. If somebody wants to do something, their body might stop them doing it. Their unconscious isn't bothered about doing good stuff. We have to override our unconscious fears usually. Of this is scary, this is different, I've never done this before, I'm getting the collie wobble, I'm getting my washing machine stomach again. And we've got free will. We can say, thanks, unconscious, I don't need your symptom, I'm going to do it anyway. And when we start talking to our unconscious, it knows what we need and want. So we can use that in a positive way to say, is this right for me? But also when it gives us a signal, we can say, thank you for the warning, I'm going to do it anyway because I'm a grown up and I can look after myself. And then you're in rapport with your unconscious. You're working together to get the best for you. So any questions before I go on to PTS? Anything, Matt, that you need to ask me?
Can I ask, Alan, is that similar to like parts therapy and hypno where
Yeah. It's actually comes from the 6-step reframe from NLP, which is a parts integration exercise with some hypnotherapy. It's got quite a lot more to it, but that's where Stephen Blake got it from. Somebody did a version of the 6-step reframe on him with his own back pain, and it worked, but it came back. And I think the difference with OldPain2Go is it tends not to come back as long as they stick to the promises they promise to give themselves, which is usually to calm down, basically, to slow down, to look after themselves first, to put themselves first, to say no. Just good advice generally about boundarying yourself and doing stuff that's good for you.
Yeah, so doing like this, but also the 6-step reframe, and then adding the positives of how they envisage a future, like a reframe.
It's a bit more than that. I mean, I've given you like a whole day course in about 10 minutes there, so I've missed loads out. So all I say, Lisa, if you want to learn it, come on the course. So I will tell you about there's an online and an in-person course coming up in the next few months, which Matt will give you, and it'll be at the end of the presentation. So it is worth. It's only one day as well, so it's worth training in.
Perfect, lovely. Thank you.
I think the questions were coming through, Matt. So Matt, have you got any questions for me?
I don't have any questions as of yet, guys. If you have any questions about OldPain2Go, just send them through chat, and I'll get them answered. And like I say, we will be doing question and answers at the end as well. If you have anything in particular you want to know the answer to now, just send it to me on chat.
Great.
If you want to send me any form of message, I'm just say hello, send me an insult, send me anything. I just really am an attention seeker. If you have any questions, cool. Just people saying nice, amazing, fat, pat, minimum fluff. Very cool, very unusual. Okay, cool. So if you have any other questions, please send them now. If not, hold your tongue until the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
I think
so.
Yeah.
Cheers, Matt. So about PTS, notice there's no D. So I do not say post-traumatic stress disorder anymore. And I know that's what the NHS would call it. I know that's what the soldiers would be labelled with. But veterans are very offended by the term disorder. I learned this when I first started working for Save Our Soldier, which is the previous veterans organisation I worked for. So in their mind, especially because it's been evoked on the battlefield usually, or not even on there, just something that's happened during the army time, they see it as an injury. So what they would call it as is a PTSI, a post-traumatic stress injury, because it happened to them in their mindset. So disorder, they feel is incorrect. But I just call it PTS because it's much easier. And it is actually what it is. It's the stress within the person. It's not, I'm not going to label it as a disorder because I was a nurse, but I'm not a doctor. And I think labels, as we know, if we've done IEMT, are not always helpful to the client, to the patient. They're helpful to the professional. They're helpful for getting support and extra money. But for the person themselves, getting a bit of feedback, Matt, the person themselves, I don't think it makes much difference. In fact, if it offends someone, then you don't need to use it. I just say PTS. So that's what I think, that's what works really well for me, is just post-traumatic stress. Barriers to seeking treatment. Now, I'm talking specifically about the armed forces and the police. Actually, I've not worked with anyone from the ambulance or fire service, but I know that my colleagues have. And I think there are similar barriers, or certainly there have been in the past. Some organisations are seeking to make this a lot better. But some of the barriers is that army behaviour is generally not based on empathy. So it is about being tough. It is about being resourced. It's not about asking for help because it's seen as a weakness. And I know there are a couple of people on the chat who've been in the army. A lot of the attitude is go out and do what you need to do in a war zone, go to Cyprus for a week, get pissed and fight each other and decompress, and then go home and be normal. And so it's just a set of an absolute set of setups that mean that the person's trauma is made worse and worse and worse, and people are not understanding it. So it's not safe to disclose it, and people really don't want to disclose it to anyone. And when they do, if they do get a service, it's based on the NHS treatments of CBT, counselling and EMDR, which I am not a massive fan of for therapy. In fact, nearly all the clients I've seen have had a really bad experience of that. The other thing is, in the army, a treatment, someone who's a psychologist or a doctor or a nurse is an officer. And so if anybody's of a lower rank, there are massive hierarchical, all sorts of really, really bad psychological stuff there that will stop treatment being effective anyway, even if they were doing something effective in treatment. So there is a massive frustration with the medical services within the armed forces. I've worked with a couple of policemen who's been very similar. It's very much a blame culture and not even recognising compensation or helping people medically retire when the job has actually traumatised them. And overall, it's the belief that the medical profession have got, and the top of the army psychology service, I saw it on an interview saying, it's a chronic condition that cannot be cured, and it's just that learned helplessness that I see it. I saw it in the drug and alcohol world when I worked in it, in the prison system when I worked in it. It's that learned helplessness from professionals, which actually hardens the bad feelings that the people have got, and the fact that I've met a lot of soldiers who just hate the army, and that's worse than whatever happened to them, because the army has not treated them well. Somebody I worked with saw something horrendous happen to his best friend in Afghanistan, was promised by the army he'd be shipped out within 2 weeks, and then he was told it'd be 6 weeks, and then he ended up being 6 months. And thinking that that is not going to compound, and it's a lie apart from anything else, it's not going to compound the person's fear and mistrust and anxiety and horror. There are some really, really poor behaviours in these systems. Conventional treatment, well, medication is very limited, and it's not seeking to change the root cause. Counselling is great if you want to talk about your problems for a long time, but if the thinking and the feeling that got me into my situation I'm in now could get me out of it, I wouldn't need a counsellor. You cannot get out of your current thinking and feeling with the current thinking and feeling that you're using. So I believe all change has to be at an unconscious level, and IEMT OldPain2Go, other things are really powerful for it. CBT and EMDR. I've met a lot of clients who've been re-traumatized by EMDR. I'm sorry if you're an EMDR practitioner, but the people they've seen haven't done it very well. Or distraction activity. Go and do some gardening, go and do some underwater basket weaving or whatever. And none of these are, in my opinion, very effective at getting rid of it, not just managing it, getting rid of it. Some reported behaviours from therapists, CBT therapists, asking the person to retell the trauma incident in minute detail while recording it, and then handing them a recording and asking them to listen to it every evening, as it will desensitize them. Does anybody in the room think that's a good idea? No, you don't. Of course you don't. So it would re-traumatize. Nobody ever does it, of course, because they know it's going to re-traumatize them. And using EMDR that repeatedly re-traumatizes them. I'll tell you a story at the end about a guy and what happened to him. And just basically telling people they have to live with it, which to them and the family, their partner, their children, their whatever they're doing, it's just not helpful. So Rock to Recovery, I'm only mentioning these because these are who I see most of my current trauma clients through, is a veterans organization. They also see people in the blue light services, so fire and ambulance and police. They see families as well, family members of these people, and the service is free to the people as they access it. So they get funding from various organizations. And they have a really coaching approach, so it's not medical at all, it's non-clinical. So it is I believe, much more effective, but where the money goes is not into this stuff, it's into the clinical stuff. It isn't very effective. I am a bit cynical and skeptical, so apologies for that. And they use mainly IEMT, OldPain2Go, NLP, metaphors of movement, along with other non-clinical approaches. And they've got a high level of success. And a lot of people are walking this planet now because of them. So I put it on here. I didn't know Kenny was going to be in the room. So Kenny Watson's in the room here. He's somebody else who works at Rock to Recovery, but has also been through the system himself. And he and his wife are in a documentary, which is going to be shown probably on the BBC and Netflix sometime later this year, to show how Kenny's, I hope you're all right talking about this, Kenny. I know you tell everyone about it, so I'm hoping it's okay. How he's got, yeah, speak, Kenny, if you wish, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Sorry, mate. I was stuffing my face with cake.
Birthday cake.
Yeah, that was all.
That sounds like, oh, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Kenny. I forgot about that. Well done.
Yeah,
so Kenny's recovery journey as someone who was a client with Rock to Recovery through to now being a coach for Rock to Recovery, and that massive transformation, along with his wife, Kerry, and their children, how it's affected them over the last 5 years. If you want to understand about trauma and how it can be worked with, wait for that. We don't know what it's going to be called yet, but wait for that documentary, and that'll be I think that's going to be a magnificent piece of television. And it's not just for veterans, of course. Big thing now about birth trauma. I think there always was midwives that knew about this and doctors that knew about this. That a lot of trauma, a lot of things that is being called postnatal depression is actually birth trauma. And I was working at one point to do a study with a midwife to look at this, but it never came through because of funding. But there's a real amount of people out there who've got birth trauma from what happened to them when they gave birth. Attacks, family, friends, school, work, physical and verbal, bullying, home, school, work, road traffic accidents on near misses, COVID panic. I think a lot of people have been traumatized. 2 years ago this week, we were saying, it's not going to happen. They won't lock us down. That's not going to happen here. And then that shock, that, wow, my world's been turned upside down, happened to lots and lots of people. And now it's happening again the other way. People are coming to see me because they're scared to go back. And of course, the news, what's happening in Ukraine, we see in real time on a 70-inch television in HD with real life. We feel as though we're on the streets of Kiev, and that is not helpful. We traumatize ourselves by watching the news, and a lot of people possibly haven't got the resilience. If you've done metaphors of movement, people who do the Hertz pattern should not be watching the news at the minute, because they feel as though they're in Kiev and having to sort the world out, and it's impossible, of course. So how I structure a session, do you want to know? Thank you. Yeah, well, you're going to find out anyway. So
yeah.
Thought you might. So I learned a lot of this from Andy Austin and his attitude. So I've got a very similar approach to formulating a session. I do it differently, Andy. But it's to say I learned a lot of the stuff that kept me safe as a therapist from Andy, because I used to do long sessions, 4-hour long sessions for not much money, and they talk too much and I listen too much. And I've learned to be really succinct and really pointed, and they're paying me quite a lot of money and they want change, so I'm going to make sure they get change. I'm not going to collude with them. So I do a pre-meeting assessment form, and it's got to be filled in depth and detail and as honestly as possible before it comes back. When it comes back, then I'll decide whether we'll have a session or not. If they don't send it back, a lot of people don't, I don't chase them. If they send it back and it's not filled in correctly, I'll send it back. And the thought behind with that is, if you're not going to do as I ask you to do before you meet me, you're not going to do it when you're in the session with me. Now, I'm a little bit less like this with the Rock to Recovery clients because I don't really get that before I see them. But if it was a private client, I still would. And when they've had a, I've given them a cup of tea and they've sat down, I just say, what's the problem? Because I want to know the problem state. I want them to tell me briefly what the problem is as it is right now. I don't want to know the story of the trauma. I don't want to know what happened then. I want to know how it is now, how it's affecting them, what's it stopping them doing, what are they feeling, what does it mean to them as a person identity-wise. And I'm listening out, of course, on their assessment and also when I meet them, for all the patterns of chronicity and all the kinesthetics and identity states that I'm going to do IEMT on. So in my little book, in block capitals down the side, as emotions come up, I'll write them down. As identity states come up, I'll write them down. As metaphors, so metaphors of movement stuff comes up, I'll write them down. So I'm letting the person chat, I'm guiding them, I'm directing them, and down the right-hand column, anything in block capitals is something I'm going to come back to, because I've got a memory like a fish. So, and what I'm really fishing for, talking to fish, what I'm really, really looking for is what happened to them during their imprint period before the age of 7, because it always started before the age of 7. It might not be obvious, but it always started before the age of 7. And I've seen clients now for so long, without exception, it's always started before they were 7. So I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for the old programs that are no longer needed. So in the case of trauma, where is the danger today in their life? Now, most people I see through Rock Recovery are functional. They are working, they're not about to kill themselves. They're not hidden away somewhere. They're actually functioning, but maybe not functioning very well. So they're acting as if there's still a danger. And I just get them in the moment to say, in this very moment today, right now, sat here, other than the danger that we've all got from traffic and COVID and all the things that we've all got a slight risk of, where's the danger in your life? Who's threatening you? When you're at home, who's threatening you? And just get them to realize there isn't actually any danger. Their life's safe. And this is what their unconscious needs to know. And it sounds a bit obvious, but this is where I'll spend a lot of time just reiterating in the now, there's nothing happening. You don't need that program of hypervigilance. You don't need to be filtering for trouble because your life's not in threat. Their unconscious thinks their life's still in threat, and that's what it's about. So then I will use the IEMT. So I'll do IEMT first before I do any OldPain2Go. So I'll do the IEMT kinesthetic patterns and any identity patterns. And if I need to, I'll use the linchpin model. So in IEMT, if you haven't done it yet, there is a very good model that Andy Austin developed, or he certainly is the one that showed me it, where we take the client with trauma around the structure of somebody else's trauma so they don't relive it. And there's something called a linchpin, which is usually something that the person themselves, it wasn't perpetrators or anybody else, it was something they did or didn't do, said or didn't say, felt or didn't feel at the time. And of course it has to be, because your unconscious doesn't know anyone else but you lives, doesn't know about anyone else but you exists. So it can't be anybody else, it's got to be me. And this is why a lot of people punish themselves, feel guilty for what they've done, don't look after themselves, all the pronoun stuff. So if I don't, if I did or didn't do something, that's the linchpin. It's got to be about me though. It can't be about anyone else because my unconscious doesn't know they exist. Might need to grow up the memory if they're particularly stuck, but often using IEMT and OldPain2Go, I found it's just changed things completely. And at the end, I will then do OldPain2Go. So the OldPain2Go will be to stop the old program of hypervigilance, of fear, of fight or flight, basically, and anything else they've said that's an old childhood program. Really, it's always started with childhood stuff, because childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, or just a decision I made at 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 year old has a massive effect. And the research is showing it's one of the biggest pre-indicators if an adult's going to feel PTS, because effectively it's a childlike response in an adult body. So what was arrested then? What didn't I process then? What didn't I learn to do then? Because when it happens as an adult, I'm reacting like that 4-year-old. I'm ultra scared. It's like this is not like a phobia, but it's a bit like a phobic response. When I was 4, the spider seemed massive and scary, and I screamed and I didn't know what to do, and I felt out of control. And I blamed spiders, and I will scream and run down the street if I see a spider. I blame the spider. My unconscious blames the spider. It doesn't blame my big brother that put the spider down my neck. It blames the spider, and I see it like I did when I was 4-year-old. So when something reignites, an extraordinary event as an adult, reignites that childhood response, I haven't got adult resources to deal with this thing because it's too much like that thing that I froze when I was 4 or 3 or 7. There's an element of brain bargaining. So what are they going to consciously do? What are they going to do on purpose? So the unconscious will not let go of its safety valve, which is the trauma response, the hypervigilance and the fear, the massive fear. It will not let go of that unless you can convince it that the person's safe. So we talk to the person under unconscious about the world around them is actually safe. And then also, this person is going to be calmer going forward. They're going to look after themselves going forward. They're not going to do everything for everyone, or whatever it is. What are they going to do on purpose to make their life calmer and happier? What they're going to do to just please themselves, or whatever we've decided in the session. So they have to promise to do something on purpose, and then the unconscious is very likely to take away the symptom. So negotiate with it and tell it that it needs to turn off that program because it belongs back in 1975 and it's not for today because I haven't got any threat. Because that dad that used to beat me up is no longer there. And if they are there, they've got no influence over me. So that teacher that was horrible to me is dead. So there's no need to be frightened of them anymore. So just to finish off, a success story. The reason I've got the quad bike there, this is a guy, one of the first people I saw, one of the first veterans I saw way back. It was about 8 years ago, I think now. And he was in Teesside somewhere, and he hadn't been out of his house for over a year, apart from to go to Catterick, an army camp near here, for EMDR and CBT every month, every 2 weeks or whatever it was. His wife had a very good job, and she bought him a brand new quad bike, and he showed me it in the garage. And he hadn't been on it. He'd been there for months. He just hadn't dared to go out the house. He'd stopped cuddling his kids. He was anxious. And I mean, you know, if you've looked at it, you know the symptoms of PTS. And his wife was standing by him, but she was at the end of a tether, really. He was leaving the army, but they wouldn't let him leave because he still had PTS. So he was hoping to be out in 6 months. And he had a job lined up, hopefully when he got rid of his PTS, to work with somebody as a lorry driver. And the time when I saw him, the time before, a week or so before, or 2 weeks before, he'd been to Catterick for his EMDR, and every time it just re-traumatized him. And this time it made him so unwell, he couldn't drive home. And the response he got is typical. So what do you think they needed to do there? Well, I'll tell you what they did do. They took his driving license off him, and they extended his stay in the army. He hated the army because they hadn't got him back from Afghanistan when he wanted to be it. So he absolutely detested the army. And now they were saying, we've taken your driving license off you because not because you've got a job lined up, but obviously he's thinking, well, I've got a job lined up that's a driving job, and now I can't even do that. And you've extended my time in the army because you're saying I'm not well enough to be discharged. And I think they call that a catch-22. So I worked with him, and cut a long story short, he had chest pain all the time and headaches all the time. His breathing was shocking all the time. He wasn't sleeping. So I listened to these and I thought, and I asked him which is the biggest one for him right now. And he said the chest pain is terrible. So I did.
Alan, I think.
Absolutely sold. Right, that's brilliant. And then we went through his other physical symptoms. and they all disappeared. So I didn't know OldPain2Go then because it was that long ago. So I did a bit of metaphors and movement with him too, with something that came up. And it was about a 2-hour session in his home, and it was beginning of February. And I said, right, get your shoes on, we're going for a walk. Ben, he hasn't been out the house for a couple of years. He said, all right then. So we walked to his local Sainsbury's, and it was just before Valentine's Day. So I stood at the door and he said, I want to get something for my wife for Valentine's Day. I said, great, yeah, off you go then. And he walked around the shop on his own. He's absolutely fine. Walked back to his house, checked in, give him a bit of resourcefulness. And I said, I'm going now. I'll give you a ring this afternoon. So I went home. About 3 or 4 hours later, I rang him up and I said, how are you doing? He said, hold on, mate. I heard an engine going off. He said, sorry, mate, I'm out on my quad bike. And then 2 weeks later, I messaged him again and he said, I'm just in Costa coffee shop waiting for my wife. When she came back that night, we just hugged, cried, talked about everything. My kids have come back, we're spot on. And I found out later, he messaged me, I think about 3, 4, 5 months later. He said, I went back, stopped all my treatment. They decided that I was better. They gave me my driver's license back and I'm out and I'm doing that job. So, and I lost my text because I changed from Apple, Boo, to Android. And I lost the text, but he said basically 2 years of them messing about with me and 2 hours with you, and it's completely gone. And that's the sort of stuff, that was pretty much IEMT that did that. And now with OldPain2Go, I probably could have done it a bit quicker, but even just IEMT and a bit of what you already know can really get powerful results. I would say caution about working with trauma if you're not used to it, and make sure that you're safe for your own capabilities. Refer people on if you're not sure, but there is definitely help for people with PTS. So that's me. There's an online training session next month, 9:30 UK time, and there's an in-person. Come to lovely North Yorkshire that should say the 1st of May. I don't know why it says 23rd January. 1st of May. It'll be beautiful weather. Come and have a holiday in North Yorkshire. Podcast is that NLP bloke as well, if you want to listen to any more of my voice. So, Matt, it's over to you for.
Thank you. That was great. That was really informative.
Questions.
I will send out the information to that as well. So if anybody wants to take up that and go and do either the online or the in-person training, I will send that over to you. So yeah, a lot of information right there. Does anybody have any questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand or send it to me on chat and I'll unmute you. Or if you don't want to come on and speak, just please send me, raise your hand and then I will find you that way. We've got somebody there. We did have a couple. Let me just find, sorry, I was going really distracted. When IEMT versus metaphors of movement.
Is that the question?
Yeah, so when would you use IEMT versus metaphors of movement?
Well, the stock answer is IEMT is when the world's fucked you up, and metaphors of movements when you fucked yourself up. From Andy Austin, quote. Yeah. And it is a bit like that. I think when I'm doing, Andy says not to mix modalities, and he won't mix modalities. I do. Obviously, I do. I've talked about IEMT and OldPain2Go. Yeah. It's not always appropriate in the same session, I do find. So sometimes a metaphor comes out so rapidly and so clearly that I'll work with that first before I do anything else I've mentioned. Now, this is with people who are functional. So a lot of the guys that come to me, are actually managing their PTS symptoms day to day. So they can explore a bit more. It's not like necessary to get them out of a bad state as they walk through the door. So in those cases, I would probably do a bit more metaphor work. I have found with a lot of soldiers that they've struggled to get the metaphors. Any time I've done metaphors with them, they're in their army gear with a backpack on, and it's just very literal. It's a re-experience. So it hasn't always worked very well. And as soon as I get that, I move away from it and go into some change work. It might be a follow-up session, because if you've done metaphors of movement, a lot of these people are obviously in containers from their childhood, and it's actually that's sparked it. So it might be a follow-up session where the person feels a lot calmer anyway, that we've managed to do some metaphors of movement stuff. But I will just with every client I see, no matter what I'm seeing them for, it's what they bring, and I will adapt everything I know through me to it.
Yeah, no. I do exactly the same. So I'm not trained in metaphors of movements, actually. In fact, I started doing it before I think it was actually called metaphors of movement. I'm not quite sure, but I do definitely fuse it. And yeah, so basically, if life has happened to that person, incidents, trauma, I tend to use IEMT. And if the person is ruining their life, then I tend to use the metaphor work. I've got a few more here. Does OldPain2Go use metaphoric representation for pain?
No, and I could, I do. And even when I'm doing IEMT, I do some modality shifting, some color breathing stuff, which I think really helps IEMT. But when people come with pain, physical pain, it tends to be very literal. It tends to be there, where it is and what it's like. And I'd like a description of it, but it's more about how has it happened. So the metaphorical representation is in the story, like my life's full of shit, rather than what in NLP terms we do metaphor of the pain. We create, what does it look like, how big is it, what size is it, what's the shape of it. That's useful too. I'm not saying it's not useful, but I probably wouldn't use it alongside OldPain2Go.
Cool. I've got a couple here as well. Susan, I have seen you. I'll just get to this one first. Can you use IEMT for someone who worries, even anxiety, for a future-based event or has a fear of something she is going to happen, exam, interview, etc.? Alan?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's probably the best. So anxiety is, I think, is probably the most present feelings that I work with. So a lot of the soldiers, a lot of the veterans I see are angry and anxious, and they might have some guilt as well. So the three pillars, if you've not done IEMT, of course, the anxiety state is one that we often, it's usually stress, whatever people call it, stress, pressure, worry, fear, anxiety, panic, anything that's future orientated started before you were 7. And yeah, if we get into that mind, I think if you're a therapist, if we get into the mindset that everything has its roots before I had logic, then we understand why it's an unconscious thing. So I'm anxious because I've got an exam, because I was anxious when I was 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, when a teacher criticized me for not getting something perfectly right, or my parents hit me with a ruler when it wasn't perfectly right. So I've got a massive setup of perfection pattern. And ultimately, anxiety is about lowering your standards, certainly for the rest of the world, if not for yourself.
Excellent. Susan, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hiya. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Hiya. Just on your structured session, so you talked about, going through your assessment and then down to you do your IEMT, and then your OldPain2Go comes later. Are you using the script for the pain OldPain2Go, or do you adapt that to the course, the PTSD?
I adapt it to the whatever the thing the person needs. So if you've done OldPain2Go, we talk. There's a guided language session that we ask the unconscious to drop stuff through them, all pain, inflammation, and tension. Now, I will always still say that, because there's a very good chance with any level of anxiety or stress, the muscles are tight and in tension anyway, even if they haven't got what they're reporting as pain. A lot of people don't tell you about the physical pain because the anxiety and the emotional pain is overtaking. So I will always assume, I will just do artfully vague. I will just do pain, inflammation, tension, hypervigilance, stress, worry, lack of self-worth. Whatever the person has said is their old program that started before they were 7, which has been reignited as an adult. And it's a catch-all. It'll pick up stuff that we haven't even talked about. Brilliant.
Thank you, Ta. I have done the OldPain2Go with you.
I thought I recognised accent. Yeah.
Bolton accent.
Bolton, I know. Proper, like, nice, isn't it? Go on.
Thank
Does
you.
anyone else have a question? So just stick your hand up and I can come to you. Any other questions at all? Krish, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Chris.
Alan, you had spoken about while doing, I think it was working with rock directory, you said you grew up the memory.
Yeah.
You had said some, could you speak more about what exactly you mean by growing up the memory and what it signifies?
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I were talking about this earlier. This is something that Andy taught me. That when somebody, we talk about their life stopped that day, everything froze that day, and they've got really clear memory of the day up to the event, and then a really hazy future because of the trauma, also possibly because of drink and lack of sleep. And so in some cases, not in all cases, in some cases it's important to talk the person through what they did next. So rather than what happened next, Matt was talking linguistically to me today, and I think it's a much better way to say what happened rather than what happened next and what happened next, what happened next. They might go off into more bad things. What did you do next that was good? And then what did you do that was good? And bring them up to the now. Do you want to add to that, Matt?
Well, yeah, so I found that when we did this, what we call an episodic time, if somebody, one of the patterns of chronicity is this cause and effect. So is life happening to you or are you doing your life? Basically, if you're letting life happen to you, you're going to seek treatment rather than change. You're the person that wants the pills rather than, the actual to do the exercise or whatever it might be. So what I found with working with clients, if I said, okay, so you got divorced, then what happened? Oh, your dog died. Oh, then what happened? Then your friend did. And so basically it sounded like sort of a country western song by the end. All these bad things happen because they're just seeing it all through this filter. Then this happened to me. Then this happened to me. So just by changing what happened is what then did you do that was good for you? So what happened afterwards, but what then did you do that was good for you since? So if something happened like sort of 5 years ago, I'm going to probably get between 6 and 10 actual achievements which they've done. And then what I then do is I then go through it and through it and through it. If I'm working from my office, which I don't anymore, I actually get them to physically space it out. And then it sort of combines with timeline therapy. So you're physically moving somebody away from the thing. So when you say, well, when you think about that thing now, instead of that thing being the cause of all this shit, this thing is actually now the thing which allowed all this other stuff to happen. It feels much further away and just insignificant. So by actually doing a reframe without doing the reframe, as it were, it's just that little bit of language and then going over it and over it, but it's incredibly powerful. And I do it myself. So, and it doesn't, I've worked with people who have been through bereavements and all kind of stuff like this. And it doesn't have to be something big. It could be something they made their own dinner, they spoke to a friend, they went out for a walk. It doesn't have to be, I did a bungee jump and all, it doesn't have to be massive things. It's something which they had control over, because before I start helping people make future goals, I want to get them into the present. So out of the past into the present, and then you can actually start to make much more realistic goals, because if people are suffering, their goal tends to be much larger and made from a place of pain. So somebody who's very overweight wants to be skinny, somebody, you know what I mean? So you're having sort of these big jumps. But if you get somebody to a place where they're okay, and also you show them what they've already achieved, actually making more suitable goals is the way that I then take that forward. Mariana, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you have a question.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Alan. Yes, I have a question. Sorry, I don't know whether I was just the only one, but it's not even more of a question. It's like when you were telling about the story with the guy that you were helping, you froze at the point when you said, "I've put my hand on his chest."
Yes.
And then I couldn't hear anything. So I don't know whether it was just me or whether it was anybody else. I would just like to ask if you could get over that again. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, from that point, or was it just a little bit missing?
It was just that point when you were talking about the person's chest. I wasn't sure, actually, but yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks, Matt.
I mean, the number of physical symptoms he was bringing and emotional symptoms, I asked him which was the most troublesome, effectively. And he said the chest pain. And so I just did the simple kinesthetic IEMT, or the IEMT kinesthetic pattern on that feeling. And I don't know whether you use it for physical feelings too, but it's not just for emotions, it's for physical feelings. And I just asked him, when's the first time you felt that chest pain? And it was pre his serving days. It was when he was a kid. And we just used the pattern of IEMT and it went. And then went through his headaches and his breathing and just used it like a reset for lots of things that have been moved out of place, as well as working on the emotional, the anxiety. And that was one of the strongest cases I've ever worked with, really. And we didn't do the linchpin, because by the time we'd done all of those things, kinesthetic and maybe, I can't remember, a couple of identity things, he didn't need it. It had completely gone. And he was back to being a better version of himself, because he could walk out on his own and do his quad bike on his own, and he couldn't have done that before.
How simple.
Too simple, that's the problem. It's professionally threatening. This is why it's don't get me started. It will never be, and nor should it be, mainstream, because they'll ruin it like they ruined CBT in the UK anyway.
Can I ask just one more question? You mentioned at the beginning, thank you. You mentioned at the beginning that you're not a big fan of the linchpin. So what do you use?
I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. I just said it's not always necessary. I am a massive fan of the linchpin model. I think it's an amazing model. And if nothing else, it helps people understand that it was what I did or didn't do. So I will still use those principles. Rather, I may talk the principles through rather than drawing it out. Sometimes I will draw it out. Sometimes I will do the whole process, and that helps when somebody's been a bit vague about what's gone on. But most people, in the way that I've asked them, they've told me what's going on, and I've heard the patterns. And I'm always searching for patterns from childhood. And I know it's a cliche for a therapist to ask about your childhood, but it makes so much sense when you understand that, well, I was always seeking attention from my dad and I never got it. So I joined the army, which was a family, and then that family shit on me as well. And it's the pattern of that family let you down, then that family let you down. And it's a reignition of an old pattern. And there's so many, well, everybody I work with, and it works for me anyway, I find the patterns of what happened to you when you were very, very young, you had no control, that's been re-evoked in your current situation. And it just helps me really help people quickly.
Thank you.
Cool, Krish, I got your message. Thank you. I'll definitely pass it on. Does anybody else have any other questions at all about OldPain2Go, metaphors of movement, PTSD, or IEMT? Loads of letters there. There's loads of letters to choose from.
Alphabet therapies. Watch out.
Alphabet therapies. I don't think I've got any more on the chat. I'll just check. I don't think I've got anything on YouTube. If you do have a question, like I say, please just do raise your hand. Oh, okay, yeah, we do have here. I offer suffering from performance anxiety for a presentation, or sometimes even when I'm called to talk in a meeting. Will your technique mentioned help?
Absolutely. It's the best thing to work with. To anxiety and performance and pressure-based stuff is, I think, the easiest stuff to work with, because it's future-based, but it will have its root in the past. So it's not like a regret, that it's not like getting over something. It's, I'm putting pressure on myself. I'm creating something inside of me that says this is going to go wrong, and I'm useless, and imposter syndrome and all those things that a lot of us have, and I used to suffer from. As a professional presenter now, it's really the proof, really, because the first time I stood up and presented stuff, I was absolutely shaking and sweating and getting it wrong, and I was an absolute bag of nerves. And I used the techniques on myself, and with practice, obviously, that helps too. But if it's performance-based stuff, whether that's presenting or standing up in a meeting, or simply just being assertive with the world and telling the world what you want instead of letting the world do you, that is, most people are not very assertive, and it really helps them be assertive, get their needs met, put their needs above other people's wants, so that they are being authentic and just saying no. No is a full sentence.
Yeah, no, I've used that quite a lot recently. It's good. We've got a question from Naz. Identity pattern. Can you explain about how this works?
So in IEMT, we work either on the feeling, the kinesthetic, or an identity. And then there's a slightly different approach with the post-traumatic stress. So if somebody comes in and says, I want to change my behavior, you'd have to work out what's the feeling that's causing that, or what is it they're calling themselves at an identity level that's causing that. So anything where somebody says, I am or I am not, is what we use for an identity pattern. So it might be as simple as I am stupid, I am thick, I am horrible, I'm unlovable, I don't deserve much, I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless. And these might be things that come out of people's mouths. So we've used the IEMT pattern of a lazy 8 rather than a Union Jack, which we do for the kinesthetic pattern. And also we look at stuff where it's not quite as obvious, where people are not verbally giving you the identities. We might look at the pronoun scapes, which might have mentioned in previous weeks, of I, me, self, and you. And when it was very prevalent that people were talking in you pronouns. So I've come to see you because, well, when you've been through what I've been through, you'll understand that you sometimes don't feel very well. And sometimes you end up with this, and people will talk in the you rather than in the I, which is just a safety mechanism of depersonalization, as well as getting you to agree with my experience. So if someone was switching the pronouns from I, me, self, and you, and sergeant, or whatever other identities they have, I would work with IEMT on the fact that there are different parts of that person that might not be working together in this instance. So we might explore it through that frame. If you've done IEMT, you'll know what I'm talking about now.
Also, week on Saturday. IMT met Eileen, I believe it's pronounced. If you want to,
Elena?
Yes, it's me, Elena. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Elena.
all.
Hi.
hello.
You mentioned OldPain2Go. Can you talk about that a bit?
Not
please?
really. It's something that's I will send you to the OldPain2Go website, and Stephen Blake, who created OldPain2Go, it's his little baby that he's created now, and you can do online. So it's a series of understandings and lessons about how we eat and how we put weight on, and also how you can help yourself with old fat to go, as he calls it. And you can also train and do some extra training if you would like, if you've done ordinary OldPain2Go, if you would like to become a practitioner of old fat to go. It isn't something, I'm trained in it, but I don't use it. And I don't really want to work with people who are overweight, because my addiction is food, and it's difficult for me to work with them because my addiction is food. So I don't work with people who are overweight, but it is a good program. It's a really good program. It's worth looking at if you wanted to do that. So I'll go to oldpain2go.com to look for that.
Okay, thank you. One more quick question. You mentioned the date for the training is Tuesday, 13th of April, but it's either Tuesday 12th or Wednesday 13th.
Thank you. My attention to details got me there again. So it's the Wednesday the 13th. Thank you for that. Wednesday the 13th. Thank you for the correction.
Thanks,
and it's the 1st of May in North Yorkshire. That was wrong as well.
Got another question from Naz as well. What kind of results have you got with this? Naz, could you just confirm that that's with the identity work that you're asking for that? If it is, basically, with identity work, if somebody's holding a belief about themselves of, say, that I'm not good enough, well, they're going to be quite an angry person. They'll feel a bit hard done by. They won't like seeing people who are successful as well, you know, because that will tend to get them down. And it will tend to sort of drive their behavior. So when I work with people when they have these underlying beliefs, and the what if pattern is really good for bringing these beliefs out. What if then, which means. And if you go, because I don't know how you do it, Alan, there's a couple of different ways, because the kinesthetic is very into memory and the identity is more sort of conceptual. And the way that I do it is I still take the identity of I'm not good enough, and I try to get them to the first time they can remember being this way and holding on to that imprint. But the imprint might not be a single thing. It might be a period of time. So it might be primary school, it might be college, it might be university, whatever it might be. It might be around the time your dad left, whatever it might be. And I try to get them to hold on to this way of being rather than this way of feeling. And when you remove this, or remove is not the right word, but when you address this actual identity, it just takes the power away from it. And the thing is with IEMT, we're not trying to install or instruct people to do anything. We're allowing them to have clearer thoughts and emotional control in the present, so they don't have to respond in the way which they did previously. So basically, it gives them that space so you can actually have better decision making in the present. So basically, it gives the person better control over their behavior rather than automatically responding. And the better you get at that, the better you get at it. Do you want to add any more to that at all, Alan?
No, it's pretty much the same. It's either if the person doesn't have a memory of where it actually came from, and the question would be, what's the representation do you get? So you hear something, feel something, see something. What goes on inside of you when I say, or when you say, I am hopeless? And then just check it out after we've done the pattern, because it's IEMT patterns are just frozen. I call them like, it's almost like ghosts. It's like movies that are films that are in front of me that might not be there all the time, but sometimes they really intrude on the present. And I need to move them out of the way, because if something's in your face all the time, it's really difficult to escape it. So IEMT is one of the best approaches I've ever found for just really clearing out the stuff. And I will use language when I'm working with people of, we just need this to go back to 1980 whatever, because in 2022 Matt's somebody with lots of resources. And I'll just use nice language in addition to the scripts, if there are such a thing in IEMT. In addition to the approach, I will actually just use nice coaching embedded commands, and it's always, I'm always in negotiation. I'm always talking to the unconscious and the conscious, because we need both of them on board, really. Yeah,
I sort of do that by watching them physically, you know, just watching how they, and it really is amazing. In fact, I was talking to Agatha just earlier because she did her certifications today, and basically just seeing the change in somebody during a session and then between sessions is just amazing. You know, when somebody, for Agatha did some work with somebody who was a similar case, you know, having was in the army and went through something a long time ago. And she just said, you know, the actual change in somebody's physical appearance, because when you stop all this stress, anxiety and worry, they just feel a lot better, and they're not having to self-medicate to get there. They just feel good. And IEMT is really good at, it doesn't make you feel good. It's like, it's the sort of that good feeling, you know, when you put a heavy weight down, you feel good, but you haven't had to take something to feel that way. It's just a relief of something.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any final questions at all? I am going to send out an email with a link to this recording, and also I'll put the dates for Alan's upcoming stuff as well. And also those who are interested in doing the IEMT training, my next one, like I say, is a week on Saturday and Sunday. Suzanne, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. Alan, just wanted to check with you and just to clarify, I think you mentioned sort of sessions were 1 to 3 sessions. Is that for the OldPain2Go?
Well, if it's pure OldPain2Go, it's usually 1 session, and with perhaps a follow-up session. Depends on how you practice. So if it's pain, if it's physical pain, it tends to be 1 session, and fatigue conditions, it tends to be 1 session. So if it's a simple one, I have 1 physical pain thing, very often it's 1 session, and other practitioners in the room will testify to that. Other more complex things, it might be 2 or 3 sessions. But anything I work with, whether it's pure emotional, if it's not OldPain2Go, if I'm just using IEMT, metaphors and NLP and just me and what I've learned to do, I very rarely see any client more than 3 times. I do have exceptions to the rule. I've got a guy I just saw this week, he's on his 20th session, but he's choosing to do that, to do more coaching and exploration, and it's kind of a bigger piece of work. He's actually feeling really, really happy now, but he just wants to go deeper into some of his stuff. But the majority of people, my aim is to have my clients for as little time as possible, empower them to do themselves without any support and go out in the world and be them. And because of that, I charge a lot of money, because it's one session therapy. But it's more, for me, it's more ethical, and it's more ecological, and it's more congruent. And to be fair, I get bored. I don't want to see a client more than 3 sessions. And that's just me. That's just me managing me and being really honest.
Okay, thank you.
When I do mainly IEMT when I work with people, And basically, I usually see people for usually 2, sometimes 3 sessions. Generally, what I'm doing now is I'm actually working on a coaching model, because I come from sort of a coaching background, a loose coaching background. And I'm actually creating an actual coaching model that uses the wheel of life that we have, so you identify the area of your life you want to work on. And then we're going to be using all of the IEMT tools and skills to actually work with the client in a particular specific area. So this, there's no amount of sessions, fewer or maximum, you can actually do on this. It's basically the more sessions you do, the more progress you'll make, because it's going to be very, very specific. I will be releasing more details of this later on. I've done EMDR, NLP, and Gestalt, or Gestalt, however it's pronounced. Which course would you think would be the most interesting for me, do you think? Which course do you think would be most interesting? So EMDR, NLP, and Gestalt. So, well, the options that you have here is, the IEMT course, and that's a 2-day practitioner, which takes you through everything. And then Alan also does the, Alan does a number of, do you know your next Metaphors of Movement courses as well, Alan?
Yeah, it's August let me look at my calendar so I get it right this time. It's 4 days in August, in the summer holidays, on purpose for teachers and people. So it's the 6th to the 9th of August in Northallerton, North Yorkshire. I am doing some over in the Northwest later in the year, over 2 weekends. But this is level 1 and 2 over 4 days, the 6th to the 9th of August.
And I think that, and then obviously you've got the dates for the OldPain2Go. I think IEMT is a great system to learn. It's a great model to learn. And then if you go on to do the OldPain2Go and the Metaphors of Movement, you can actually sort of blend them all together. But I think probably the IEMT is the best place to start, in my opinion.
I would agree. I think that if you're someone who works with physical, so if you're a physical therapist, I would say OldPain2Go. But if you're doing more emotional and talking psychological therapies, I would say IEMT first and then consider the other 2. Yeah.
Perfect. Sally, you have a question if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment on since I've learned IEMT, it's been a game changer for me, to be honest. I've done OldPain2Go previously with Stephen in Cardiff, sort of trained in that, hypnosis, NLP, and I've been working with IEMT on its own, and the changes that I've seen are phenomenal, to be honest. But I haven't really used OldPain2Go. I've used it a couple of times. And I find it better in person. I've used it on Zoom a couple of times and not had much success. So I think I need to refresh myself on that. And it's quite intriguing using it with IEMT, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I can do refreshers on those Zoom courses or in person. I'm not a big fan of online for treatment, but over obviously the last 2 years, I've used it quite a lot. OldPain2Go works really well on Zoom if you're confident. It works well if you're confident, I think. It's one of those, it's like IEMT. It's a definite, you're doing something, and anybody looking into the room would see you doing something. And OldPain2Go, I think, is even more wacky. It's a bit more woo-woo. So a lot of this stuff, I believe, is about rapport with your client and making them feel safe to do something that might seem a bit silly to them. And I always make me the down, I'm the low one, I'm the daft one, do some daft stuff with me, rather than making them feel uncomfortable. But I do know from training OldPain2Go for the last 4 years or so that a lot of people, unless they use it immediately after training in it, they'll not dare use it. So it does. I think it's something worth revisiting, and obviously we'll do you a deal there if you revisit it.
I use the brain bargaining on its a standalone thing. Really, I use that because that's still good exercise to do to get them on board. But the I can't think what I was going to say. What did you just say about the? I can't remember what you just said.
It's getting people to stand up and move is it's different to what we normally do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean what Matt was talking about with the episodic memory was a fantastic exercise on our training. I think that when we went to the second day, you asked us what we enjoyed, and every single one of us love that exercise because it does reframe me. Oh yeah, I have done really good since I've done that. And yes, there have been lots and lots of positive things. So I use that as well. But using I struggle, I think, with OldPain2Go is getting the story right. If you get the story, then it is really, really effective. But
yeah, and I think I hope what you heard from what I was saying, it is all about getting the story anyway. Even if you're not going to use OldPain2Go, if I can find out, and it enhances the IEMT, I think, to understand the child, because we're going for the youngest memory we can get, aren't we? So we're looking for where it started, and all the therapies I do are about getting the person in the now and realizing what the now is actually giving me, which is often no threat. I've got a nice house and I've got a family and I'm calm and I've got a job and I've got free will and there's nobody bullying me. And it's just getting people to realize that that threat then, whether that was bullying at school or that threat then, whether it was at work or on the battlefield, is not happening anymore. And it's just getting the person, they're unconscious, to realize that they switched on the threat and it's safe to switch it off again. And it's safety, it's comfort zone. It's just all comfort zone.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to say that.
You're welcome.
Cool. Does anybody have any last questions at all? I know some people are messaging me. I will send out a general email as well about obviously IMT training. I do trainings once a month. I'm currently just waiting to go have an operation, hair transplant. Be a long operation. I'm going for a sinus little operation thing. So I don't want to book stuff at the moment because you know what it's like. You just get told when you're going, and I don't want to sort of disrupt that. So, but I generally run a IMT training online once a month, and I'm going to start doing it midweek as well. So probably a Tuesday and a Wednesday, or I might even do it over Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and do it for 5 hours a day. So my next one, someone's asking, is the 19th and 20th. So that's not this weekend, it's the weekend after. And then I don't have any more planned in for the time being, simply because I need to get myself medically right, which is going to take a long time. No, I need to get myself medically right because I've got lots of issues kind of going on. I need to go for lots of scans. It's nothing serious. It's just all fun and games. It's just annoying more than anything. It's obviously if I have stuff done on my sinus, then I'll be able to speak properly, and that's kind of like my job. Just gonna see if I've just got any more questions for you. And also people are asking, I do all of my trainings online now. I used to do them in London, but the way that I do it now is I do it online because most people are going to work online. So I teach people online on how to use it online. Obviously, you can use it in person, but most people are using it online as well. Does anybody have any last questions for Alan? If not, we're going to let him go into the cold, dark Yorkshire night. Do you have a dog, Alan?
2.
Yeah, of course he does.
Whippets.
From the north,
whippets.
of course.
Yeah. No, they're not. No, they're not. Don't be racist. Yeah.
I'm from York. Right, okay. Anybody have any last questions at all? So I will be sending out an email tomorrow. Thanks very much, Jules. I'm going to send out an email tomorrow with a link to this recording. Obviously, it is on YouTube as well, but I'll put it onto my private Vimeo account. I just want to say a massive thank you, Alan. It's been really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us. Guys, I'm actually going to turn the chat off so you don't just have to, so you can actually chat with everybody rather than just send it to me. If you want to share your thanks with Alan, please do unmute yourself, say thank you, send messages saying thank you. I will send out his training details as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm going to be doing lots more of these in the coming months as well. So thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very much. Great session.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
See you later, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt, for putting this together.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Cool. Thank you, everybody. Lots of nice messages coming in here. They're all coming to, they're going to everybody. Cool. Cool. Well, thanks very much, guys. Still got a few people left, which I'm going to kick out in a sec. I'm going to stop